Hello, I'm Mark Baer. Welcome to the Joe Cupcake Chronicles. Tonight, raw deal. Yeah, it was a noir night, and Joe Cupcake was the star of his own movie. Joe saw it as a movie, and Joe believed in a happy ending, but the world was getting darker all around him. He goes out in nature, trying to meditate, trying to channel the universe, and what comes back to him is a very unpleasant planetary groan, to put it mildly. Things are not all right. I've mentioned that the Joe Cupcake Chronicles are, in a way, third-person autobiography. It's a way to try to tell the truth, and telling the truth isn't because we can't face who we are, although that's part of it, or our dark thoughts, or our fears, or just our imperfection. But part of telling the truth is how weird life is. Joe Cupcake meets his interior minister of sinister. Well, we all have one. How else would we get to work in the morning? And Joe, whose job is doing PR, papering over sins, putting a euphemistic face on things, is having a harder and harder time. But he's bucked up by his boss, who tells him, today we say Orwellian, tomorrow it could be Cupcakean. Joe's having trouble with Absurdity Inc. His job is getting to him. He's writing such pithy phrases as, when it's too late, we'll be there. This is about the time when the oil was spilling all over the world. The nuclear plant in Japan had just blown up, and Joe's job as a PR man is to gloss it all over. Well, he thought he'd been weighed in the balance and found wanting. He is the man in the gray flannel suit. Poor Joe. Joe had other more positive things going on during this episode. He got to go to Paris, where Joe Cupcake became Joe Gâteau, and he wore stripes. He hung out with George Gershwin, who wore plaid, and together they walked down the boulevard looking for the right street horns to do the opening numbers of An American in Paris. So, Gershwin did need Joe's help, of course, he did. Love is blind. Love is strange. Love is a wretched job. Words snarled on a wall, next to a distorted temptress like a late period de Kooning with lots of teeth. The alley was black with more than just night. Out of darkness light, ha! All he saw was a cat licking at a carton of discarded Chinese, and a poster saying the circus was in town. The tightrope walker had nothing on him, nor did the clowns. A newspaper scattered on the asphalt. Her picture, front page. He had to find her before they found her. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. It was a raw deal. Yeah, it was a noir night in a corrupt and hypocritical world, and Joe Cupcake was the star in his own cosmic movie. He knew the plot, knew the players, saw it all in gritty black and white. He'd seen the car chase, the torrid love scene, heard the music swell, and when the curtain came down, he joined the cast and crew at the Bang and Whimper, where the dead eat free. It was like a dream, yeah, like a dream, a mad rush. All the ghosts were out. It was perfect.
million stories in the naked city. There was the double cross and the big showdown. Pow, pow, bullet holes through his lapel, her blue eyes, all future as his world wobbled. The truth was a sea of crayon through ink. Everybody's got a secret, Joe. Save yourself from hell. But still, Joe wouldn't spill. He was a man with a code. He knew he'd suffer, knew he'd be betrayed, knew things would get worse before they got better. Knew he'd be ridiculed, humiliated, and humbled. But always he believed he would prevail. Joe was a creature of Hollywood. He believed in a happy ending. But his faith was wavering. When it's too late, we'll be there. Oil fouled the sea, and CO2 choked the sky. More freedom, less regulation. Wow. Another year had passed, and again, it was summer. Summertime, and the living is easy. Fish are jumping, and the cotton is high. According to Janis Joplin, yo mama's rich, and yo daddy's good looking. Hush, little baby, little darling, don't you cry. What is it about a tune that can bring tears to your eyes? Wondered Joe Cupcake. Joe was a man for wonder. The pure amazement of all he didn't know, would never know. The vast universe out there. Joe considered all the books he would never read. Life. He would hardly scratch the surface. Wonder. The beginning of all deeper understanding. Carl Jung said, "At times I feel as if I am spread out over the landscape and inside things, and am myself living in every tree, in the splashing of the waves, in the clouds, and the animals that come and go, in the procession of the seasons." Was that what it meant to be alive? Joe had those days. They were few, but it didn't take many. Joe didn't care if God existed or didn't exist, or if God was blue or green or pink. He thought speculation about the Creator was futile. It was the creation that interested Joe. Things were first made, then words. Joe wanted innocent eyes, fresh eyes. Joe wanted the latest information. He took the artist's view and believed every generation must meet the world for the first time and discover it anew. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and the door will open. Hey, Joe, pull up to the bumper, baby, in your long black limousine. Every day was a battle between nothingness and somethingness. There was so much noise, babble, a cacophony. He needed a pocket of silence. This is the day we have. Enjoy. Wherever the light falls, it's all Buddha, it's all beautiful. Behold, the lilies in the field. Joe sat in the field of clover and listened to the humming of bees. The field was alive, pulsing with energy. The message, once again, raise the vibration rate. There must be reverence. The earth is a teacher. And thought Joe, It's all a gift, the miracle of breath in and out. And it was a beautiful morning. Hawks circled high, and behind was a pallid semicircle of moon. He sat, he looked, he listened. He waited for his spirit guides. Joe told himself, close your eyes, calm your mind, give thanks for the gift of life. When he put his finger to his belly button and transmitted to the universe, ... the message that came back was dark and fuzzy. A tribal wailing of raging multitudes, a hollow white noise. Gunk in the machine, not at all what Joe was expecting. Words jammed together, words that made no sense. Hello, hello, hello. An empty echo inside Joe's head. Anyone there? No answer. Only a vague veil of murkiness and the drone of TV. Biblical floods, unmitigated terror, and a talking lizard selling insurance. Joe was searching for unused parts of his brain in search of lost mind. He'd lease, not buy, not in this market, and in a gated community. No one in, no one out, unless you had a pass. Joe couldn't take chances. As you might remember, there had been a robbery. Joe's brain had been taken. Springs and wires and gears and cables had been disassembled. So had the sinks, toilet, and plumbing. It had all been gutted. The burglar was a mean monkey who left paw prints and a glossy photo of the kitty cat with the pedal pushers, who was in the mood for squanderlust. Was she involved? Some thought so. Insurance wouldn't cover the loss. They thought so. Still, no one could figure a motive. There was nothing useful up there one could pawn. Not even the copper wiring was worth much, and the data storage was all outmoded. In fact, everything in Joe's brain was outmoded, outsourced, worn out, out of date. Just a jumble of synapses that fired willy-nilly and churned out nonsense. But Joe's bosses wanted their man back. Sure, he was an odd stick, a pretzel bender, a question mark, but that's why they hired him. Joe assured them losing his mind was not a big deal. A rent-a-wreck would do, no need to spend extra. And he had a backup plan for everything important. Redundancy, redundancy, redundancy was his motto. A plan was hatched, materials were gathered, some goop, shredded rubber, crushed styrofoam. They could blow it in through his ears and jumpstart his mojo with some James Brown. Get on up, like a sex machine. Ugh. Joe was amazed how easy it was to replace everything else with a quick trip to Circuit City. Nothing worked very well, just like before, but the images were vivid. He remembered smooth legs under a silk dress at cherry blossom time, the sky dark and foreboding, purple in early June. We live on fantasy. Without fantasy, we wouldn't even breed. One's real life is often the life that one does not lead, said Oscar Wilde. And this was certainly true of Joe Cupcake. He was at the car repair shop. He needed to replace a hose after failing his smog test. He was unshaven and unbrushed, in the waiting room, gray sweater and house slippers, a codger, or worse. There he sat, flipping through the mechanic's glossy fashion magazines, a dumb smile on his face, miles and miles away. He was frolicking with the Giorgio Armani model, with the black helmet haircut, fingerless jeweled gloves, a tiny pistol, and a spray of stars tattooed on her back. And later he ducked in a doorway while the thunder was crashing, with a girl in torn fishnet stockings. And suddenly, the simple life didn't look so simple. He needed a stylist and a hair person. Then Joe did delicious things with the Calvin Klein model with the gap between her front teeth, red pouty lips, shirtless, selling jeans, a splash of red over her image. And Joe flirted with a girl in a dress made out of photographs, and then with another wearing a see-through bubble dress. And he was laughing as he joined a scrum of young, naked flesh selling something they certainly weren't wearing. Then off to a party on Montauk, late night, back alley kisses, and the gap-toothed model again, posed in front of a Gerhard Richter painting. Oh, what a crowded world one moment can contain. Joe was living the life, la dolce vita. But as he switched to an interior design magazine, he heard a distant droning voice. It was the mechanic. Joe needed a new dipstick. Somebody put the wrong dipstick in the Saab. Joe nodded. Whatever, just do it. And as the mechanic backed away, Joe saw himself now in a tight-fitting, striped Ferragamo suit, sitting on the back of a powerboat. Where was he? Looked like the south of France. Nice. Her niece. Joe had more spring in his step when he returned to the smog station. He told the woman at the desk, "I'd better have passed this time. I can't stand failure." The woman smiled. The new hoses had done it, and his car had passed. She said, "I know what you mean. My ex told me I was a failure. But he was the one with the gambling problem. 22 years together, and I didn't feel like a failure. And on the day I left, I was happy. And I've been happy ever since. It drives him crazy." Someone once asked Charles de Gaulle if he was a happy man. "What?" he growled. "You take me for an idiot?" Joe was happy. Joe was optimistic, content, grateful, and lucky in every sense. Joe was also an idiot. That was his great gift. But happy as Idiot Joe was, it wasn't a happy time. Out in the land, there was free-floating anxiety. Joe in the suburbs feared the tax man. Joe without a job feared the bill collector. Joe on the hill feared Joe in the gully. Joe at the border feared Jose squatted in the bushes. And Trader Joe had to recall cilantro. Entropy ruled. Things fell apart. There was more bad news than good news, and he wasn't expecting a check from the Publishers Clearinghouse anytime soon. There was inertia, pessimism, mournful talk, a bad year for friends. A suicide, a truck crash, an overdose, a heart attack, pet deaths, a dissolving partnership, and Grandma got scammed out of $5,000 on the internet. There was the biopsy, longtime friends squabbling. This one called the police. That one wanted to sue. Another friend was living in her car near the dog park. Joe also learned one friend had a habit of exposing himself. The voice on the other end of the phone said, "It sounds funny, but in reality, it's not very funny." "Gee," said Joe. And then out his own window, Joe watched his neighbor's tree fall and take out his fence. A typical Thursday. Nothing to do but laugh. Joe had a gift for laughter, often inappropriate, and when he listened to the universe, he, in turn, heard a vast and inextinguishable laughter. It was a golden time. Time to buy gold, speculate on gold. When all else fails, hoard the gold. Hunker down, bunker down, bugger up, yup. Buy now, ask us how. Our operators are standing by. Fortunately, Joe still had a job. His services at Absurdity Inc. had been extended, and better yet, his services weren't much required. Joe was brought in only when it was okay to leave the audience scratching their heads, going, or what the? He was their WTF guy. They saved him for the 11th hour, which, much to Joe's surprise, didn't always mean 11 o'clock. Language, so slippery and elastic. Joe and his fellow cupcakes had rights, but not as many rights as corporate Joe. Joe, for his part, was happy to cash the check, but anxious it couldn't last long. When it's too late, we'll be there. A pithy phrase for a pithy company. Joe needed a follow-up line. Because we care. No, not even Joe was that cynical. He crossed it out and wrote, because we can. Joe considered his words too glib. Joe could hear his bosses now. Forget it, Joe. Don't worry about the little guy. He's happy enough. He has a TV and a toaster and a car that mostly runs 100 years ago. He would have been a king. So let's not worry about the little guy. He's got it made. At least for a few more months before we take his house. Joe was thinking about his own house, now in a nicer neighborhood, with a higher class of criminal. One of his neighbors had been arrested for price fixing and selling tainted produce, another for insider trading, and another for backdating stock options. Joe would never be smart enough to do anything like that. Luckily, Joe had other talents. He could run with the hares, hunt with the hounds, banter with the bunnies, and cocktail with the cockatoos. But his real expertise was stretching doublespeak into triplespeak and blowing big lies into bigger lies without popping the bubble. Sometimes the wad did pop and he'd have to peel it off his face. That was the trouble with lies. They were sticky. Joe shut his briefcase, took in the silence. But then he muttered, omelet. Not as in, it was time for breakfast, damn the cholesterol, but as in, you have to break a few eggs, meaning heads, to make one. That was the latest spirit-piercing epistle from on high. Corporate life was getting to Joe. He feared for his soul. He feared more that his stock options would become worthless. He feared a big hand on the lever, then whoosh, the floor beneath him would open, and he would plunge into blackness. He wrote, because we can, we will. What he thought was, you have been weighed in the balance and found wanting. Joe saw his future, scrawling missives on dirty car windows. Repent! Free car wash with Philip. And then Joe heard, payback, need some, the big payback. Get ready for the big, Took my money, got my honey, that's it. I'm mad. Revenge. Another day, another story. God spared the child, it was a miracle, but not such a miracle for the other 99 passengers. Thank God, Joe didn't have to write PR for God. What was the role of the loyal functionary, Joe wondered. What was the role of the cog in the wheel? Is the cog meant to think or to do? To beep or not to beep? Only the Roadrunner knows. Joe found a quote buried inside a poem by John Berryman. The opposite of a true statement is a false statement. But the opposite of a profound truth might be another profound truth. I'm not a mess, shouted a woman in a red dress. I'm a hot mess. And there it was. Summertime, and the living was easy. Fat Joe shuffled, Slim Joe swayed. Regular Joe stood tall, Irregular Joe sashayed. Boulevard Joe, a.k.a. Joe Gateau, wore striped pajamas and understood how the color blue could make your jaw drop. Blue, that jazzy color of feeling. Those were the plush days, the cool blue Paris sky, the distant upward sweep of the Eiffel Tower and champagne with the smart set. Jazzy Joe in his mind's eye could see the striped awning of Joe Cupcake, where he was proprietor when he was not writing simplest poetry while being photographed by Man Ray or trading witty barbs with Oscar Levant. In 1926, Joe Cupcake in Stripes and George Gershwin in plaid walked the Grande Armée, hunting for taxi horns for an American in Paris. George was looking for horns that could sound certain notes. In New York, they go from party to party, penthouse to penthouse, Steinway to Steinway, and George would play. And later, they'd go meet Ira for some words. A foggy day in London town. But when he got to Hollywood, George Gershwin was invited to houses without pianos, or sometimes to houses with pianos when he wasn't asked to play, and this depressed him immensely. In the end, he sat in a dark room with a contraption strapped to his head to stimulate the scalp to stave off baldness. Unfortunately, it could not help a brain tumor. George delighted in what he was doing. He worked until he finished and moved on. It was all done in a joyful way, not in a driven way, said a woman who knew Gershwin. And we always thought there was world enough and time. Joe told his wife, "Wouldn't it be great if we had a piano and I could play and sing?" "No," she said. "Every time I got mad at you, you'd hide behind it and sing something stupid." Reality again. "Life is sorrow," said the Buddha through smiling lips. "Life is sorrow, and yet so beautiful. The story is that our friends die, we die, and there are no happy endings over time, only the happiness in between." Aware of the temporariness of it all, Joe committed to be aware that it can all disappear in a split second. The next second, he slammed the back door of his minivan down on his head. Typical Joe. The days of wonder are upon us, and each new revelation increased his wonder. Joe sat on the mountain and waited for a vision. The word came. God is empty, God is full, God is here, God is there, God is gone, God is come. God is dead, God is alive, God is wrathful, God is love, God is simple, God is complex. God is everywhere, God is nowhere. God is noble, God is unknoble, God protects, God lets it happen, God is the light, God is in the dark. God is where you find it. God is white and black and gray and grayer, confusing and confused. But July and the wild rose was not confused. She was a pink fact, a delectable rumor spreading in every corner of Joe's garden. And he knew God was everything going on around him all the time. God is all about the surprise.